One, two, 1, 2. Come and stand before your Maker, full of wonder, full of fear. Come behold his power and glory, yet with confidence draw near. For the one who holds the heavens and commands the stars above is the God who bends to bless us with an unrelenting love. Rejoice, come and lift your hands and raise your voice. He is worthy of all praise. Rejoice, sing the mercies of your King, and with trembling rejoice. We are children of the promise, the beloved of the Lord, one with everlasting kindness, bought with sacrificial blood, bringing reconciliation to a world that longs to know the affections of the Father, who will never let them go. Rejoice, come and lift your hands and raise your voice. He is worthy of all praise. Rejoice, sing the mercies of your King, and with trembling rejoice. All our sickness, all our sorrows, Jesus carried up the hill. He has walked this path before us, he is walking with us still, turning tragedy to triumph, turning agony to praise. There is blessing in the battle, so take heart and stand amazed. Rejoice, when you cry to him, he hears your voice. He will wipe away your tears. Rejoice, in the midst of suffering, he will help you sing. Rejoice, come and lift your hands and raise your voice. He is worthy of all praise. Rejoice, sing the mercies of your King, and with trembling rejoice.
Hi everybody, my name is Tomas Cardero and I am the video editor here at Grace Community Fellowship. I just want to welcome you to this week's sermon and direct you to the links below to make sure you stay connected. Now I'd like to pray in preparation for Steve's sermon. Dear Lord, thank you for this week. Thank you for this time to gather online. Please be with us as we hear Steve's message. Open our hearts and give us the correct ears to hear what he has for us today. Amen.
Life isn't fair. I never planned for this. I've heard phrases like that hundreds of times in my office. People go through difficult times and they feel like just life isn't fair. I mean, right now, some of you are thinking, life isn't fair. I'm sick and tired of the smoke in the air. I'm sick and tired of the ash in my house. I'm sick and tired of the ash in my car. I'm sick and tired of wearing a mask. I'm sick and tired of COVID. Life isn't fair. And for some of you, you've got other things that are preoccupying your mind and you're thinking, this just isn't fair. It isn't fair that my kids have to go to school on Zoom, which doesn't work anyway, you're thinking, and it isn't fair. It isn't fair. And it isn't fair that you're wondering about your job, and it isn't fair that you're going through difficult times. Maybe your house burned down. Life isn't fair. Maybe you had to be evacuated. Maybe your car is burned up. Maybe some of those things have happened to you, or somebody that you love, or somebody in your family, or somebody that you know, and you're thinking in the back of your head, this just isn't fair. Maybe it's something else in your life. Maybe your spouse walked out on you. Life isn't fair. Maybe you got fired from your job, laid off. Life isn't fair. Maybe you look at social injustice. Maybe you've been mistreated. Maybe you've been exploited. Maybe you've seen the effects of human trafficking and you're thinking those things aren't fair, and sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes we go through hard times, we go through, I'm going to use the word catastrophes, and we just kind of wallow in things and we just kind of sulk and we just kind of think this isn't fair. And we grapple with those things and we have these hurts in our lives. And when we have those things, sometimes we think this: where is God when life isn't fair, and what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Where is God when these things are happening to us? So I'm very excited to talk with you today because we're going to talk about two women in the Bible, and their names are Naomi and Ruth. And I love this story about them because I think they are fantastic examples of two women who walk by faith when life isn't fair. And we're going to see some things bubble up out of their lives that just demonstrate that sometimes we go through the journey of life, but we need people, listen closely to me, we need people to go through that journey with us. And that's Ruth and Naomi. So just to give you a heads up, Naomi is the mother-in-law, Ruth is the daughter-in-law. And I want us to read the backstory to their, well, life isn't fair story, to the catastrophe. And that's going to be found in the book of Ruth. It's in the Old Testament. And we're going to look at Ruth chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. And it says this: In the days when the judges ruled, that'd be about 1200 BC, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife's name was Naomi. The names of their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, that's a tribe in Judah, and they went to Moab and lived there. Now Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So this is the catastrophe. Life isn't fair. And the story begins in the area of Jerusalem, and Naomi and her husband live there. It's where all their roots are. It's where their family is. It's where their friends are. That's where they have a job. And we need to look through this story through the eyes of Naomi right now, that she's in her home and they hit a famine. Now then, that's like an economic downturn of the most severest kind. And so when that happens, Naomi, like any of us would do during an economic downtime, would probably think, hey, it's only going to last a few weeks. Oh, it's only going to last a few months. Maybe it'll last 6 months. And so you begin to tighten the belt at your house. And what you do is you go to Costco, and then you buy those big tubs of food, and you're being very, frugal with what you're doing, and you're looking at things thinking it's going to get better. I got this 5-gallon tub of mac and cheese, and we're going to make it through, and we're going to just really tighten the belt. We're going to do away with some of the extra stuff, and we're just going to stick it out here. And pretty soon you just kind of run out of money, and you're just thinking, oh, now I got to sell my house, and I got to sell my car. And for them it would have been, selling my donkey and my camel and all my possessions. I'm just trying to get through, and they're in this economic downturn. Many of you know what that's like, because right now you've faced with it, or you're thinking about it. You're thinking, hey, we live in a time when we have this economic downturn, and what happens is everything preoccupies your mind. You're thinking about your social calendar, lack of a social calendar. You're thinking about your friends. Maybe you're comparing yourselves to them. You're thinking about your retirement account, which has gone away. And you're thinking, what are we going to do? And so you're just in this survival mode. That's where Naomi is at the beginning of this. They're just desperate. So what do? They say, hey, it looks better in the country of Moab. Now, I've been on the border of that country, actually, and it's only about a 50-mile walk from Jerusalem, maybe 70. And it's kind of a scenic place, I think. It's next to the Dead Sea, and so they go over to that country, which historically has some strong animosity between the people of Moab and the people of Israel. And so they pack up everything they have left, and they move to Moab, and they find some jobs. They put down some roots there, and eventually there's there's a health crisis and she loses her husband. Her husband dies. Elimelech dies. Now, Naomi's a widow, and she's raising 2 boys by herself. You may know what that's like. You're a single parent. You're raising kids. So the 2 boys grow up and they marry 2 women from Moab. And so all of a sudden, in Naomi's home is this cultural divide, you might say, or this cultural mix. We could even call it an interracial thing a little bit. And so it's just different all of a sudden. And then they go through another health crisis. And the Bible says that it was about 10 years later that both of her sons die. I don't know what you call that. A catastrophe? Life isn't fair. I never planned for my life to be this way. That's where Naomi is. Maybe that's where you're at today too. You're thinking, I had plans for my life. I thought it'd be this way. I thought we'd have a house with a picket fence, a few acres. I thought I'd have this degree. I thought I'd be in this career profession, and it just didn't work out that way, and life isn't fair. But for Naomi, it's even more so a catastrophe. Both her sons die, and she's probably thinking, I remember the first steps they took when they were little. I remember the first words they said. I remember the first jobs they had. I remember the times that we used to eat together, and all of those are dashed. Now, if you're a widow like Naomi, you don't have a lot of options, and in those days there wasn't a safety net built into the government. And in fact, if you're a widow, you had a couple options. One, you moved back in with your parents, but I'm gathering from the story that Naomi's older, maybe her parents aren't even alive anymore. Another option is just to get remarried, because in her culture, the culture of that time period, your safety net was your family, and her family's gone. So she's looking at the situation, and it's pretty desperate. It's very desperate. She's running out of options, and so she begins to think, I better move back, and maybe I can move in with my cousins, right? I can move in with my extended family. I don't have any close family at this time. And so she's pondering that, and she's left with 2 daughter-in-laws. She's had an economic loss. She's had an emotional tragedy. And that's where she finds herself. And life just simply isn't fair. When you're a widow today, or you're in that situation maybe, you can fall back on some job skills or go get trained, and not Naomi. She's having to think about, what do I do now? I'm running out of options at this point. That's where she is. It's a total, comprehensive catastrophe in some ways for her, a total loss. Now then, with these 2 daughter-in-laws, what's going to happen in the story is that one of them goes back to her family in Moab, and the other one, Ruth, joins Naomi for the rest of her life. So here's our big idea today. Spiritual friendships turn the journey of life into a journey of faith. What do you do when life isn't fair? Where is God when life isn't fair? Well, that's the key point, because when life isn't fair, we need each other. Like never before, right now, we need each other. There's been an outpouring in our community because of the firestorm, because of the Red Cross shelters. We opened up our church for people to stay overnight. We opened up our church during the day. If people needed relief, they could just come inside, charge up their phones, get a drink of water, get their breath. More than ever, we need each other. More than ever in the church, the body of Christ, we need rock-solid relationships so we can do the journey together, because the journey of life needs to turn into the journey of faith. I don't think in our story that Naomi's going to make it by herself if she hadn't teamed up with Ruth, her daughter-in-law. And I don't think Ruth would have made it either unless she would have teamed up with Naomi. And so they're going to end up in a spiritual friendship that they go through the journey of life together, and they come out the better for it in the journey of faith. So I want to work out this concept for us that if we have spiritual friends, a community of friends, a community where we base our lives together, then we can go through the journey of life, and we can turn that into not a journey of life isn't fair and sulk, but a journey of faith and trusting Jesus Christ. So let's work this out. Number one, not everyone will be willing to take the journey with me. Ruth 1:14, as they wept aloud again, then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. And so they're getting ready to leave Moab, and not everyone is going to go on the journey with her. Just like you and I, when we're going through difficult times, not everyone's going to go through that with us, but we do need some people to go through life together with. Naomi has just told her two daughter-in-laws, hey, don't go with me. Stay here in Moab. In fact, in the text it says previously, hey, she's telling them, stay here. You'll have a better chance if you just stay with your own families. And Orpah says, I'll stay. And Ruth says, no, I'm going to go with you. And in fact, Ruth says, your gods are going to become my God. And she's acknowledging Yahweh, the true living God at that point, and going with Naomi. Naomi has this gut level reaction. She's thinking, hey, to her two daughters, hey, you're not going to make it if you come with me, so stay. But Ruth makes a clear decision. And sometimes when we go through catastrophes, difficult things, not everybody's going to walk with us through that. But we do need people to walk the journey with us. And so we need to have that clear-cut awareness that not everyone is going to, partner with us, journey with us, and go through difficult times. So we do need people who will go through these things with us. And Ruth clings, it says, clings to her and goes through it. Instead of becoming poverty-stricken, they branch out and head back from Moab to Jerusalem. Here's what Ruth 1:16 says, but Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you, talking to Naomi, or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her to stay behind in Moab. This is an incredible statement by Ruth. She's saying, man, I'm with you all the way. We all need people like that in our lives. Who are going to stick with us through thick and thin. People are going to be there when, a catastrophe hits. When there's a death in your family. When the doctor says you have cancer. When you're struggling with infertility, you can't have children. You emotionally hurt. You need people who will stick with you. That's what Naomi has right now. Number 2, let's work this out a little bit more. Sometimes life leaves me bitter. Naomi is not, separated from the possibility of bitterness. In Ruth 1:20, she tells her friends, don't call me Naomi. She told them, call me Mara. It's a Hebrew word, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. It's so easy to become bitter. Many of you who have listened to me before have heard me say this maybe 100 times. Bitterness is the poison pill you swallow, you hope the other person dies. And so sometimes we get offended by somebody, we become bitter, we become resentful, and then we hope the other person just dies. Well, in Naomi's case, it's not another person dies, she hopes she dies. She's become so bitter at circumstances in this case that she has become, maybe depressed, sad, just resentment, bitterness has gripped her. We become bitter when we don't get that business contract we wanted. We become bitter when we don't get the job. We become bitter when we don't get accepted into the school that we wanted to. We become bitter when we don't get the career advancement we wanted or the promotion. We become bitter when we want to have children and we can't. We become bitter when our kids are teenagers and they don't come home at night, those kinds of things. We become bitter when we want to be married and we're not. We become bitter when our marriages fail and our families go through difficult times. We become bitter when we think about living from paycheck to paycheck and we wish we just had a little bit more money. Just a little bit more and it would be okay. And then we begin to think, here's how I think people process this by and large, God must hate me. And that's not true. But then we begin to think that way. And Naomi is only human, and she feels the sting of this, and she becomes bitter by it. Personally, my perspective is pretty well painted in this story because when I was 15, my dad died, and it was just my mom and I, so I grew up in a single-parent home, and And just lately, it's kind of dawned on me, yes, it was a single parent home. I had lots of other interaction from incredibly close relatives and friends and so forth, but it was a single parent home, and I watched my own mother struggle in life and to run a family business. And so I read a story like this and I can see how difficult it is, and that's why it has such a soft spot for me when I see people who have gone through something like Naomi has, or something like my mother has went through as well. And in one sense, I became bitter sometimes because I grew up on a wheat farm, and I had to work on the weekends and work a lot during the week. And instead of the summer going to play baseball, I had to work, or instead of going to summer camp, I had to work. And at times, I would be resentful about that. Why is that happening to me? So I can see this concept in this story. Number 3, let's work this out some more. God's rescue plan is often a process. Ruth chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Now Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz." So I want to give a little spoiler alert here. Naomi's going to get rescued from her life isn't fair situation. Ruth is going to get rescued from this life isn't fair. And what's going to happen is Boaz is going to get married to Ruth. Spoiler alert. Get to the end of the story. And so this is what eventually rescues them from their situation as well. God is going to provide someone for them. And this is not a one event like, oh, they met and got married. It was a lengthy process as well. Look at verse 2 with me. It says, "And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, 'Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor.' Naomi said to her, 'Go ahead, my daughter.' So she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she is working in a field belonging to Boaz, who is from the clan of Elimelech." So this might be a little confusing to you. So in these days, God instituted a safety net for poor people. And so farmers, people who own land, were supposed to leave part of the grain behind in their fields. And if you were poor, you could go to the field and take the food. But it wasn't given to you. You had to actually go out and work for it. It was free, but you had to get up and go get it. And so Boaz is leaving grain behind in his field, and Ruth is going to go and harvest field from there. And that's how Ruth meets Boaz. What I have learned, though, in my personal life is that when we're stuck in this life isn't fair mentality, we want God to rescue us instantaneously. Right then. God, just turn everything around. Make our lives better. I just want everything right now. But often it's a process, because God uses a process to help us grow. And this is going to be true in our story as well. I found that in my life. Mary and I moved from Dallas, Texas to a small community in Washington State. So we left Dallas, a city of several million at the time, maybe 3 million, and it was sunny there all the time. And we moved to the Olympic Peninsula, where it rained our first 12 months there at 100 inches. And it was a small town of 8,000. We thought we were going to die. I mean, it was so different. And when I first got there, I was working 70 hours a week. We had 2 kids under the age of 2. I was gone 25 out of the first 28 nights. I was gone all the time, and it was demanded and expected of me, and it caused problems in our family and our marriage, and we just sat back and said, life isn't fair. That's not what we had planned when we made that 2,500-mile move into my first ministry position as well. And so we sulked in this life isn't fair kind of mentality, and it was just awful for us. And I want to tell you something. We were there 9 years, 4 months, and 3 weeks. That's how long the process took for Steve Hill. I don't know how long the process for you will be. It might be a few months or a few years or 10 years, but God uses the process to mature us, and we need to be aware of that. During this time period, I often had several mentors to help me through the situation, and Mary had one as well, and her name was Ginger, and she met with her every week for, I don't know, maybe 9 years actually. And it was just somebody that she could partner with to go through the journey together, Remember, like Ruth and Naomi, so Mary had her spiritual friend, not to just go through life, but to go through life in a faithful way, the journey of faith together as well. So God doesn't maybe bail us out instantaneously when life is hard. It's often a process as well. I remember how many times I used to pray in my office, kind of like Star Trek, beam me up, Scotty, just get me out of here. I just want to go somewhere else. I would read scripture, I would pray out loud. It was those times for that difficulty that God used a process to help me to become mature, and God will help you as well. But it's a process. But you want to go through the process with someone else. Here's the fourth thing I want to kind of flesh out in this book of the Bible. God has answers. Number 4, God has answers that we don't know about. So in the passage we read, Ruth chapter 2, verse 3, so she went out, entered a field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. That means picking up grain. And then this phrase, as it turned out, she was working in the field belonging to Boaz. I love that little phrase. 4 words, as it turned out. Man, that's no accident. There's an answer for Naomi and an answer for Ruth that they don't know about. You know, sometimes we go through hard times and we go, where's the answer to this? What's God going to do? When's this all going to end? How will this ever work out? And then God provides an answer that you had no idea was coming. You go, well, I wouldn't have picked that way to solve this problem. But God says, that's my way of solving it. That's my way of intervening in this thing. And you go through terrible times, a catastrophe, life hurts, you ache. But God provides an answer that you had no idea about, that was even possible at all. Ruth 2:5 says, Boaz asked the overseer of his harvesters, who does that young woman belong to? The overseer of the foreman replied, she is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi. And I know what this really means in Hebrew. Boaz is saying, wow, who's that? Is she married? That's what he's asking right there. Who is that? Catches his eye. Ruth and Naomi had no idea that was what was going to happen. Years ago, a friend of mine packed his bag, his duffel bag, and left his wife. I got the call when that happened, and we talked for a while, and I remember turning to Mary going, there's no hope. Of course, I knew there was hope, but there was no hope, okay? It's one of those things where this is impossible. I know what's going on. The family's got a volatile anger problem. There's a lot of dysfunction. You know, there's things going on in the home with their kids. It's just, everything's gone sideways there. And I go, there's too much water under the bridge, too much bad communication, too much, well, betrayal and mistrust, and just, it's never going to go anywhere. So my friend packs his duffel bag and heads to the military base where he's stationed, and when he gets to the military base, his commanding officer notices that something's not quite right. And he makes him go to the Navy hospital to get checked out. He goes, I think you're depressed, you don't look good, you're going to the hospital. So they get to he gets to the base hospital, and they admit him into the hospital. And he carries his duffel bag into the hospital room, and he pulls out his clothes, and he pulls out a book out of the duffel bag that he accidentally grabbed when he was leaving his home. The book happened to be a woman's book on how to be a godly woman. The book was given by my wife to his wife. Now, this is what happened. I mean, I can't make this stuff up. He sits in the hospital bed, he reads that book on how to be a godly woman. Guess what? They reconciled a few weeks later. That book changed his life. I think of that story and I go, God, that is not an answer I would ever pray for. One of my buddies left his wife. Maybe he'll read a book on how to be a godly woman and he'll go back to his wife. That is crazy stuff. But it's true. And 25 years later, they're still married. See, God has answers to your situation that you don't know about. Here's my question to you. Will you trust Him? Will you trust Him when life isn't fair, when you feel like He's not there and you don't know what to do? That's the question we all have to get to at one point. Number 5, take initiative and resist passivity. One of the things I noticed in this story that Naomi and Ruth could have had their own pity party and just sulked the whole time, and they could have just wallowed in it, but they took action. And sometimes when we are hurt or we go through difficult times, it paralyzes us with either grief or fear, depending on what's going on, some emotion like shame or embarrassment, and we just can't get going in our lives. But they don't make excuses. I mean, they could have made the excuse, hey, we're poor, hey, we're widows, hey, there's a famine in the land, there's an economic thing. Ruth could have said, hey, I'm from Moab, and you don't like me, and there's racism going on with the Jewish people to the people of Moab and vice versa. In fact, when you read through the book of Ruth, she's always called the Moabitess, which was a way in which the author of this, probably Samuel, was trying to communicate that Ruth was different, but yet she believed in Yahweh, and an incredible thing was going on in their lives. So they resisted doing nothing. They were not going to be passive. And in fact, Ruth, here's an example of her being active and not passive. She went to the field to glean. She took the initiative. Sometimes when life isn't fair, you need to take the initiative and take steps out of your comfort zone. You have to get the ball rolling. You have to get your life moving, and then ask God to guide and direct you as you're taking those steps. Don't be overly focused on your goal. Be focused on God leading you to where you need to be. That's what Ruth is doing. She goes to the field, and in fact, it's a very dangerous place for her. In the story, Boaz actually tells the workers in his field, do not harm that woman. And it's very adamant because it's a dangerous place. And he tells his foreman and his regular workers, you watch out for her. You make sure she's going to be okay. But even though it was a dangerous place to be, dangerous circumstances, uncomfortable circumstances at best, Ruth takes the initiative. She is not passive. This is what we need to do. A few weeks ago, I went on vacation. And we drove to Boise. We're on our way to Utah. And so Mary and I, we stopped at this place by the Boise airport called In America. And here's the thing. The room was $69 a night. $69. That's what makes my story a little bit interesting, because Mary has high standards for hotel rooms. They better be super clean. I don't have that standard. I have a standard about not paying a lot of money for a hotel room. So I'm thinking in my mind, hey, I like $69, but we're going to get there. She's going to take one look at the room, and I know what's going to happen. She's going to say, we're staying somewhere else. But I'm hoping for the best. Maybe this room will be clean. And you know what? It was awesome. It met her standard, and it met my standard of being a tightwad. So, we're all good right then. So the next morning, I go downstairs for the little breakfast they have, and I asked the young woman across the desk clerk, I said, hey, how long have you worked here? This is a great hotel. And she goes, well, I've worked here a year and a half. And she began to tell me that she started as somebody cleaning the rooms in the hotel, cleaning the bathrooms. And she said, I did that for 9 months, and then they promoted me, and then they promoted me again, and now I get to be the assistant manager down here at the desk. And then she goes, someday I want to manage my own hotel. I'm thinking, that's incredible. Here's somebody who's 25 years old. They started at the bottom. They took the initiative and worked themselves up. And I'm thinking in my mind, she's going to run this hotel chain someday with that kind of ambition. And she had the great customer service, and man, she's got all the talent in the world. This is going to be a slam dunk. She's going to move up. Those things don't happen when you're passive about things. You have to start somewhere and make progress. Even when life isn't fair, you need to stop somewhere. You need to start somewhere and move forward. Number 6, and we're going to close with this. God's grace is closer than you think. Ruth 1:8 says this at the beginning of the book. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back each of you to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness. Circle the word kindness. As you have shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. The book of Ruth, and throughout the Old Testament, this word for kindness is a Hebrew word called hesed. It's a very interesting word, and it's difficult for translators to translate because it's rich and robust in meaning. It can mean grace, it can mean compassion, it can mean forgiveness or love, it can mean loyalty. Often it's translated to be loyal in your love to the Lord. But this word always has to do with relationships, a kindness in relationships, either from God to us or from one person to another. It's a relational word. And in fact, it signifies the compassion of someone who is superior to someone who needs something. In other words, we can come alongside someone who needs compassion because we have the capacity to give them comfort. In Ruth 4:14, we see the grace of God show up at the end of the book. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel." They're talking about Boaz getting married to Ruth, and then they begin to have children. And a guardian redeemer or a kinsman redeemer is someone who was, close to the family who could marry someone else. This concept of being a redeemer is actually transferred to Jesus as our Redeemer. And in fact, Ruth is the great-grandma of King David, which means that Ruth is the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandma of Jesus. And in fact, we could almost say, if it wasn't for Ruth and Naomi going back to Jerusalem, meeting Boaz in the field, there wouldn't be Bethlehem and Jesus being born in a manger. Now, obviously, God would have got Jesus here. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying this is a pivotal story. It shows the line of what God will do. And for Ruth and Naomi, the grace of God was right there for them. It's always closer than you think. And right now, you might be in despair. You might be in despair about the smoke in the air, about the fires. You might be in despair that people have lost their lives. You might be in despair that some people have been exploited and mistreated in our community or in our society. I get in despair when I see my friends in Southeast Asia going through tough times and human trafficking in those places. If you're feeling in despair, you're feeling life isn't fair, I want you to remember this. The grace of God is closer than you think. It's right there. His compassion, His ability to redeem you and to save you from a situation is right there. So our response is to trust Him with that, to trust Him with the situation. I've been talking to people this week, and I've been hearing things like, life isn't fair. This is happening. It's almost like, Naomi. And what we need more than ever is a small group, a community of people that we can rally around, that will give us support. Instead of feeling empty forever on the inside, we can have other people that will bring us grace and compassion and hope in our lives. This is why at Grace Community Fellowship, as your pastor, I'm guiding our church to see that people get connected in some way in relationships. Remember our big idea that we talked about, spiritual friendships turn the journey of life into a journey of faith. You need those spiritual friendships in your life. They're based on your faith in Jesus Christ that turn your, going through life, the life journey, into a journey of faith. And that's what you need. I want to help you connect, to have that kind of relationship. Wouldn't you like to have that kind of relationship with someone else or with a group of people like Ruth and Naomi had? That you could go through life together, support one another. That's what we all need. Some of you, you really need that right now. Others of you, you need to give it. You need to give compassion to people. You need to be there for people. You're doing great. I'm thrilled. Now's the time to step up. Here's how we're doing at our church. It's crazy times, I know, COVID and so forth, but we have ways to get connected. Go to our church website, www.gcfweb.org, and right on the front of the website, you can click Joining a Community Group. You can join a Zoom group. There are some groups that will meet in person with social distancing and those things, whatever makes you feel comfortable. Maybe you could grab the spiritual growth guide that I just wrote called God's Twitter feed and grab that book and just start your own group. That would be awesome. I encourage you to do that. But I invite you to grab a book. I invite you to join a group. You can go to our webpage. You can buy a book there. You can join a community group. We'll help you with that. But during this crazy time, I also want to unleash you, empower you to just grab that book and just do a group on your own. That would be fantastic. You know people. You've got your own set of friends. You have acquaintances, and you know who to ask. Just pray about it. If you don't have that kind of situation, go to the webpage. Find a group. Let us know, and we'll try to match you up in a group as well. When I've gone through tough times, what I've learned is simply this, that I need people to go through the journey with me. Because then it becomes a journey of faith instead of a journey of bitterness. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, I pray for each person listening that you would give them grace. Instead of being filled with hopelessness and despair, I pray that you would give compassion. I pray that as a church that we would respond and show compassion to people by going through life together with them. God, we thank you for all that you're doing in our lives. We trust you, even when life doesn't seem fair. And we pray this in Jesus' powerful name. Amen.
1, 2. Peace be still, you are near. There's nowhere we can go, you won't shine redemption's light. Our guilt withdrawn, and as you rise, we come alive. The grave is lost, the old is gone, and you're making all things new. You are making all things new. You are making all things new. We are free. Hope is found, you are near. Our hearts forever sealed by this love that came for us. Now we are yours, and as you rise, we come alive, and you're making all things new. You are making
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and go to gcfweb.org for more information. We hope you have a great rest of your day. Make sure to love people where they're at and help them follow Jesus.